this video, I'm going to talk about Unit 1 of Block 1, named Personality and Individual Differences. Let's start with a brief introduction of what are we going to study in this unit. What are our objectives? We will learn about the definition of individual differences in this unit. We will understand what are the factors that contribute to the individual differences, what is the definition of personality, what are the aspects of the personality, and how personality is an indicator of an individual differences. We will also learn about various theories of personalities like psychodynamic view of personality, behavioral theories, cognitive theories, humanistic theories, trait theories, and also Indian perspective on self and personality. Let's move ahead. So let me ask you a question. What do you mean by individual differences? How do you define individual differences? In layman terms, individual differences define how one individual differs from another. It can be physical or psychological differences. We use the term individual differences to define the differences between two individuals. Okay. Now, how can we find or study the individual differences? We can study the individual differences via studying intelligence, personality, one's interests, what motivates one's and what motivates another, how creative one person is, and what is the aptitude of the person, and the list goes on. Now, many of you will be thinking that what is the need to study individual differences? Let me tell you, individuals are unique. Each and every human is very unique in their own kinds, and they differ in many ways. That impacts how one behaves. Okay, it enables psychologists to understand, explain, and predict the likelihood of an individual behaving in a certain ways. It focuses on what makes the individual unique. By studying the aspects of individuals on personality, intelligence, motivation, aptitude, creativity, and problem solving, one can understand these differences. Let me tell you in the simpler terms again, individual differences is studying the differences between individuals as observed by self and others, and also underlying their psychological determinants. Let's move ahead with the definition, scientific definition of individual differences. The scientific study of observable differences between individuals is known as individual differences. Okay, it is also known as differential psychology. As put by Thomas Camaro Premuzic in 2015, the goal of individual differences is to identify the most general aspects that underlies one's individuality, and also helps the psychologist to conceptualize a theoretical classification in order to predict differences and similarities in human thought, emotionality, and behavior. Studying individual differences helps one to explain the questions and answer the questions how and why of a human behavior. How do one do that? By focusing on the underlying psychological determinants. Let's move ahead with the next slide, which is the nature and nurture debate. When one is talking about psychological characteristics, a question arises, whether or not are we similar to our parents in terms of intelligence and personality, or we tend to differ from them. Another question, are we similar? Does the genetics play a role in determining one's personality, or environment influences are also there to predict the personality of an individual? This nature versus nurture debate is very central to the study of individual differences. Study of biological basis of individual differences is the new area of study in the field of individual differences. It is also known as behavioral genetics. It also uses various research methods like brain imaging to study how early childhood experiences tend to have an impact on determining the individual differences. It studied the role of genes as well as the influence of cultural practices on one's behavior. Moving ahead, learning about one of the indicators of individual differences, which is personality. Personality is a very common word that we used in our everyday life to explain a person, like he has a very charming personality, or let's just say he's a very shy person, is a very calm personality. So where does the term come from? The term personality comes from the Latin word persona, which means mask. Okay, so what does personality means? Personality means showing some aspects of yourself, but one might be different, or from within, like from behind them. But what is behind the mask and what one is showing can be different. When we tend to refer a person as shy, or calm, or charming or clever, we mean personality. In simpler terms, it refers to one's characteristic ways of behaving. But personality is not as simple, as we think it is. Okay. So when we use the term personality in our everyday life, we refer to the outer roles or the characters that is played by the person, which relates to nice ways of one's behavior. In order to understand what are the things that are included in the personality, we should first learn what is not covered in the personality. What is not covered in the personality? Personality does not include the intellectual abilities, mental abilities, or the intelligent components. Personality needs to be stable and as well as broad. Moving ahead, when studying personality in terms of individual differences, it should include these 4 domains. It should be psychological in nature. It should contain a non-intellectual domain. It should be relatively broad or generalized pattern, or it should not be in transient state. That means it should have enduring dispositions. When defining personality to define the individual differences, it should contain the non-intellectual domain of personality, which includes one's interests, emotions, habits, interests. Okay, and it should be psychological in nature, and it should be relatively broad. Okay, moving ahead with the scientific definition of personality, Gordon Allport was the first psychologist who published the first major textbook of personality psychology in 1937. According to him, personality is the sum total of all the biological innate dispositions, impulses, tendencies, appetites, and instincts of the individuals, and the acquired disposition and tendencies which are acquired by one's experiences. Okay. Later on, he revised the definition in around 1961, and he defined personality as the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine the individual's characteristics, behavior, and thoughts. Now you will understand that I have focused on 4 words: dynamic organization, psychophysical system, and individual's characteristics, behavior, and thoughts. Let's move ahead with the understanding of these 4 terms and why I have put emphasis on these words. So according to the Gordon Allport definition of personality, these 4 things are the basic to understand one's personality. What do you mean by dynamic? According to Gordon Allport, personality is not static but dynamic in nature. Okay, one tend to adapt and be sensitive to the context and the environment around them. Okay, so according to him, one's personality keeps adjusting according to the context and the environment continuously. Thus, a balance is maintained between the inner self and the environment. Are we clear? Moving ahead with the organization, what does Gordon Allport meant by organization? He referred organization to the idea that personality being as a whole. We cannot consider personality as in few parts or a few aspects, but we consider personality as a whole organization. Okay, in totality. Hence, personality is very specific and unique to a person. Are we clear here? Moving ahead with the psychophysical systems, what does Gordon Allport meant by psychophysical systems? He meant one's physical and mental aspects. Okay, so one's personality is considered of physical and mental aspects. Physical से मतलब है हमारा biological and mental aspect से हमारा मतलब है psychological. Are we clear here? One's personality consists of psychological and physical characteristics or aspects. Moving on with the characteristics, behavior, and thoughts, it refers to the traits that are said to be relatively stable and consistent. Okay, and these are one's way of behaving and thought processes and emotional responses. We will learn more about traits in the next upcoming slides. Moving ahead, Walter Mischel in 1973 gave another definition of personality, which states that personality consists of distinctive patterns of behaviors that includes one's thoughts and emotions, which characterize each individual's adaptation to the situation of his or her life. Moving ahead with the next slide is to understand the difference between personality and states. Okay, traits are one's internal disposition or one's preference, how to react or behave in a certain situations. It focuses on differences between individuals. It also answers the questions like why different individuals differ in their thought, feelings, or behavior. Moving ahead, what are states of a person? State is a temporary differences within the individual. It focuses on one individual, but in various situations. It answers the questions like why the same individual thinks, feels, or behave differently in different situations. Let me give you an example in explaining traits and states. So when one say that I am an anxious person, he's describing or explaining his trait. But if a person is saying that I'm feeling anxious, like just before entering the interview office, so he is explaining a state. Just like I said, that state is a temporary emotion or temporary difference. Okay, so it occurs within the individual. So when a person stating that he is feeling anxious or she is feeling very happy, it is just a state. I hope you are clear with the difference between traits and states. Moving ahead, what are the aspects of personality? As I told you that there are various aspects of personality. We can broadly classify them into biological and psychosocial terms. Biological aspects of personality includes physiological response processes, one's physical appearance, one's temperament, one's hormones. And psychosocial aspects of personality includes one's interest, one's emotional characteristics, one's abilities, one's ability to socialize, and one's behavioral responses. As I already told you, that consistency in these psychological characteristics is very important to consider, or to state that that person is to give a person a personality trait. The consistency is very important. Moving ahead, now we will learn about various theories of personality. So there are various theories of personality in the psychodynamic, behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic school of psychology. But the dominant in explaining personality is trait theory. Let's move ahead with understanding each and every theory. First, we will learn about psychodynamic theories of personality. Okay, so Freud was a pioneer in psychodynamic theories of personality. His original theory was called psychoanalysis. So according to him, unconscious motives, desires, and forces helps or forms one's personality. What does it mean by unconscious motives? You are looking at the iceberg. So according to Freud, he gave mind in a form of iceberg. He explains mind in the form of iceberg representation. So the larger part, which is beyond, like below the sea, below the ocean, which is not seen, from the upper level, is our unconscious mind. Okay, and the little iceberg things that we are aware of right now, that is our conscious mind. That is our awareness. Okay, so his theory is called dynamic, as there is a constant tussle or conflict between the unconscious and the conscious psychological forces. Okay, he also stated 3 structures of personality: id, ego, and superego. Okay, he also proposes that the interaction between these determines how one's personality is going to be like. Let's understand about id, ego, and superego. Id is like a child. It drives on pleasure principle. It operates on unconscious mind. Okay, it wants instant gratification. On the other hand, superego is our moral conscience, which we get from our parents, experiences, situations, friends, family, which tell us that which gives us the feeling of guilt whenever we do wrong. And ego is the one that ego can be understood as the middleman that creates a solution when there is a conflict between id and superego. So let me give you an example. So let's just say that one wants to it wants an ice cream. Okay, so but you are having a cold, so it is not right to have ice cream during colds. Okay, so superego and id may conflict. Now ego will come up with the reason that after you get fine, you can have the ice cream. For now, you can wait, or you can control your cravings for now, because you are ill and you don't want to get more ill. So in order to get better, you should not have ice cream right now, but after you get well, you can have the ice cream. So in this way, ego creates a balance between the two. Moving ahead, we will learn about the defense mechanisms. So what are defense mechanisms? Defense mechanisms are the mental mechanisms that protects one from breaking down whenever there is a conflict between id and superego. Okay, it tends to operate at the unconscious level. There are various kinds of defense mechanism, but we will learn about some in this unit. So first, we will learn about rationalization. Rationalization can be understood as, rationalizing or giving a justification for your wrong deeds, or, for one's inappropriate behaviors. Like justifying that, others are cheating, so I can also cheat. Okay, moving on, denial. Denial is when, one refuses to accept the situation or the thought as it is, because acceptance of that thought or, of that thing will lead to uneasiness, distress, and anxious. Denial is very common when there is a death of very close or, loved one. Moving ahead with the sublimation. Sublimation is a very healthy mechanism, healthy defense mechanism, and it can be understood as channeling, or channeling one's undesirable impulses into a more socially acceptable or desirable ways. Like when you are angry with your partner, or you are angry with, or you get a low score on the marks, so you are sad. So you channel your sad or the anger into something that is socially acceptable, like, playing games, doing sports, or listening to the songs. Okay, regression. Regression is another form of defense mechanism in which a person go back to the earlier stage, behaving in a certain manner that is not age appropriate. Like an adolescence when, get scolded by the parents, or get harsh treatment from not scoring good marks, he starts wetting bed, which is not age appropriate behavior for an adolescent child, to wet a bed, to wet bed. So regression can be understood as going back and adapting to, behaviors that are, one should have adopted when they were little. Okay, projection can be understood as one individual projecting or attributing one's unacceptable thoughts and qualities onto some another individual. Projection is commonly seen in parents, because they tend to, project their unfulfilled desires on unfulfilled needs onto their children. Reaction formation can be understood as an individual projecting or attributing one's distressful or, unacceptable thoughts and qualities about something or someone, in the opposite way. It can be understood as, by an example, like when a boy or a girl went through a breakup. He or she is sad, but trying to, react in a opposite way, being happy. Moving ahead, displacement. Displacement is, shifting one's emotional reaction from one person or object to another. It is quite common to see that, it is very common in males when they come from office, like if they are scolded from their boss, they tend to displace their anger towards boss to their wives or onto the objects by breaking it or tearing it down. Last but not least is repression. Repression can be understood as repressing or completely removing the source of the anxiety. Okay, like a person subconsciously removing or forgetting about the childhood abuse. Okay, moving ahead are the psychosexual stages of development. According to Freud, he put emphasis on the inner child, early childhood experiences, and he states that, development of personality, it occurs in 5 stages, which he termed as psychosexual stages of development. The stages are oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, latency stage, and genital stage. According to Freud, personality is established in these 5 stages. Okay, and each stage of development is marked by the conflicts, which helps in building one's personality. If each psychosexual stage is completely successful, then a healthy and successful personality results. If issues occur in any of the stages of the development, then fixations occurs. Okay, fixation is getting stuck at that stage. Okay, according to him, the childhood goes through a series of stages in which pleasure-seeking energies of it are focused on the erogenous zone. Okay, erogenous zone can be understood as as any part of the body that will lead to the pleasure. So in the oral stage, the erogenous zone is infant's mouth, and he satisfied his needs, or gets pleasure by breastfeeding. Okay, through sucking or rooting reflexes. If the child is fulfilled with his needs and feel pleasure, he develops a sense of trust. Otherwise, a fixation occurs. If fixation occurs at this stage, the individual tend to have issue with dependencies, or the problems resulting in oral fixation such as drinking, eating, smoking, or somewhat nail biting. Next stage is the anal stage, which range from 1 to 3 years. Here the erogenous zone is bowel and bladder control. Okay. In this stage, the main focus is on bladder and bowel movements, and in this stage, toilet training occurs. Okay. Moving ahead to the next stage is phallic stage, which range from 3 to 6 years, and the erogenous zone is genitals, where a child starts to discover his or her sexuality, and he or she also discover his genitals. Okay. And and when they enter the latency stage, all the sexual interest becomes dormant for the latency stage, and when they enter the puberty in the genital stage, these sexual interests mature. As I told you that if like fixation occurs in the ways a children is raised and the disciplinary method that is used by their parents while raising them. So if a parent is very strict about the toilet training in the anal stage, then the individual will have a very orderly, rigid, and obsessive kind of personality as an adult. And if the parent is very lenient about the toilet training, then it will lead to a very messy, or destructive personality as an adult. Okay. So moving on with the next slide are the criticisms. No theory is complete without its criticisms. Okay. So psychodynamic theory of personality has a criticism that it puts too much emphasis on sexual urges, which is not very culturally fair, and it was also disregarded in many cultures. But the influence of Freud has been seminal, and they resulted in newer Freudians. The next slide are the behavioral theories. B.F. Skinner, a behaviorist, he focused that personality is influenced by learning, and that learning occurs through patterns of reinforcements. Okay. He also defined operant behavior and respondent behavior. Operant behavior is, can be understood as behaviors or responses that operates on the environment, which cause changes in the environment. On the other hand, respondent behavior are behaviors that are elicited by the stimuli in the environment. For example, operant behavior will be, a mother allowing a kid to play video game for an hour after he or she has completed their homework. Whereas on the other hand, respondent behavior is one salivating after smelling the food. So the stimuli in the environment, which is the smell of the food, will elicit a behavioral response, that is salivation. Okay. I hope we are understood with the difference between operant and respondent behavior. Moving ahead, Skinner introduced operant conditioning, in which there are two types of reinforcements: positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is when someone adds something pleasant or desirable. Okay. Negative reinforcement is when someone take away or remove something very unpleasant or undesirable. Okay. Negative reinforcement can be understood as leaving early from home in order to avoid traffic in their way. Positive reinforcement can be understood as when something valuable or desirable is added, like a mother saying that if you complete your homework on time, you are allowed to go out and play with your friends. Are we clear about the types of reinforcements? Moving ahead are Skinner's reinforcement schedules. So according to Skinner, there was two types of reinforcements: intermittent reinforcement and continuous reinforcements. Continuous reinforcements are those reinforcements which are which can be understood as getting reinforcement at every time the response is displayed. And intermittent reinforcement refers to getting reinforcement, but not every time the individual shows the desired or particular behavior. Are we clear here? So it can be understood as like a mother giving instant rewards to their child after just displaying the behavior is our continuous reinforcement. But a mother saying, we will go to shopping next week if you complete your homework today, in time. That is intermittent reinforcement. So according to Skinner, there were 4 intermittent reinforcement schedules: fixed ratio, fixed interval, variable ratio, and variable interval schedule. It is very easy to learn the difference between these. So let me tell you a shortcut that will help you remember this. Ratio equals response, RR. Interval equal time period. Okay. So to understand fixed ratio schedule, we need to understand that at a fixed response, reinforcement will be presented. And on the other hand, at variable ratio schedule, after 2 or 3 responses, one reinforcement is given. After 4 or 5 responses, another reinforcement is given. So that is variable ratio schedule. In the interval schedules, fixed interval schedules can be understood as, giving reinforcement after, 1 hour. Exactly 1 hour, you will get the reinforcement. Another hour, you will get a reinforcement. But in the variable interval schedule, the time period is not fixed. One can get reinforcement after an hour, or after 30 minutes, or after 4 hours. So it is not fixed. Okay. Are we understood with the differences between the 4 intermittent reinforcement schedules? Moving ahead, according to Albert Bandura, observation and imitation in any social situations affects one's behavior and hence have an impact in shaping one's personality. The learning theories did not take into account about the role of social context in forming one's personality. Hence, Bandura focused on interaction of individual with the environment. And later on, Bandura introduced the role of human cognition in determining the personality. Hence, he renamed his, social learning theory as social cognitive theory. According to social cognitive theory, personality is shaped by two-way interaction or a reciprocalism among the factors related to the person, the environment, and the behavior itself that tends to affect and shapes the behavior, shapes the personality. Moving ahead, there was another psychologist, Rotter, who in 1954 introduced the concepts of locus of control. Okay, what is locus of control? Locus of control is the assumption, that is made by the person, that explains whether they have the control over the situations or events that are happening in their life or not. Cognitive theorists emphasize the personal beliefs, self-efficacies, and interpretations of the social world and the situations that influence the behavior and personality of the individual. Okay, so there are two types of locus of control: internal locus of control and external locus of control. People who says that they have internal locus of control tend to be, they meant that, they are responsible for whatever happening in their life. Whereas on the other hand, people who say that, with people with external locus of control tend to assume that they do not have any control over their life, and whatever happening is happening because of the social situations or, external environment. It can be understood with the example, people with internal locus of control. Let me give you an example. Okay, so a student explaining that he or she should have done better, studied better, so they will be able to, score well, displaying internal locus of control. Whereas on the other hand, when a student gets low score and they said, the paper was tough, or the examiner was very strict in checking, so they are displaying the external locus of control. I hope that everyone is clear about the distinction between the internal and external locus of control. Moving ahead is another cognitive model of personality, which is cognitive affective personality systems, which was given by Walter Mischel and Shoda in 1995. It states that, there is a cognitive affective influence on the behavior of an individual, and personality of an individual is affected by these 4 components: perception of the situation, skills of the person, to deal with the situation, effective emotional response of the situation, and anticipation of the outcome of their behavior. Moving ahead with the humanistic theories, we learned about the learning theories, we learned about the social cognitive theories, we learned about psychodynamic theories. Now we move to humanistic theories. Humanistics believe that all human beings are good, and they aim at greater self-understanding, and they strive for self-actualization. According to humanistics, no human is bad. They are innately good, but the situations make them bad. Famous theory of humanistic is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which self-actualization is the main motive of each and every individual. Okay, it starts from fulfilling very basic needs, and proceeding to further psychological needs, and ultimately reach to the self-actualization, which is fulfillment of one's destiny and fulfillment of one's potential. According to Maslow, lower needs must be satisfied in order to proceed with the next one. According to him, a person should be able to complete his physiological needs. Only after completing and satisfied with the physiological needs, one should move to the psychological needs. One would be able to move to the psychological needs. So according to him, there are 5 stages. Physiological needs, which includes water, sleep, food, shelter, clothes, breathing, and homeostasis. Moving ahead with the psychological needs, after completing of physiological needs, one one wants safety needs, which is security of one's body, health, family, and employment, resources, and property. After that, a person moved to the higher need, which is love and belongingness needs, which includes family, sense of connections, and develop a meaningful relationships. After that, esteem needs comes, in which respect, status, self-esteem needs come. And the final and the being need is self-actualization, which is attaining one's full potential. According to him, there are four levels. The first four levels are deficiency needs. Okay, he also named them as deprivation needs. And the last level is the being needs or the be need. Okay, so the self-actualization is the being need, and the other four are deficiency needs. Only after completing of these deficiency needs, only after meeting these deficiency needs, one can move to attain their full potential. Okay, moving ahead with another theory, another humanistic, who was Carl Rogers, who developed the concept of self. Okay, according to him, the need for providing unconditional love to children by their parents for the positive personality development. So according to Carl Rogers, when a child is accepted without any conditions, he or she will develop into a healthy and fully functioning person, and hence leading to a very healthy personality. In Carl Rogers also introduced his therapy, which is known as person-centered therapy, in which unconditional positive regard, genuineness, and empathy are the three hallmarks. Okay, he also termed his theory as self theory. He also introduced the concept of self, which is the central tenet for his theory. He defines self as the organized, consistent, conceptual gestalt composed of perception of the characteristics of I or me, and the perception of the relationship I or me in interaction of various aspects of life, together with the values attached to those perceptions. So according to him, a self is the perception of I and me, and how one relates to other, by interacting with other person and forming relationship with other persons, according to him, that is oneself. He also introduced the concept of real and ideal self. According to him, there must be a congruency between the real and the ideal self in order to make a healthy personality. So what do you mean by real and ideal self? Real self is the one that you are. Okay, what you want to become, or what you would like to be, is your ideal self. Like I want to be a psychologist is my ideal self. But here right now, I'm teaching you psychology. I'm being a teacher is my real self. Okay. Moving ahead, are the trait theories of personality, which are very dominant and very very dominant in explaining the personality. So what do you mean by traits? I've already explained you. Traits are stable and consistent over time and situations. Trait approach highlights how one individual differs in various traits. For example, I might be very shy, but my brother, on the other hand, is very sociable. Okay. Another example, your friend might like to, play sports, but you like to, stay at home and, chill, Netflix and chill. Okay. According to Alport, traits are central in order to, understand one's personality. He also distinguished traits into three types: cardinal traits, central trait, and secondary traits. So the cardinal traits are, most pervasive ones. Okay? These are the very general ones. Central traits are less pervasive because they are, generalized disposition of an individual. Whereas on the other hand, secondary traits are very, very less generalized, and it cannot be, directly observed or, seen or observed directly. Okay. It is also less relevant when it comes to define the personality of an individual. Okay. So we will understand this with an example. Like Mother Teresa is very good and charitable. On the other hand, Adolf Hitler, we can, explain his trait as evil or, very strict. Okay. We can say that Albert Einstein was very brilliant. So these are cardinal traits that are very pervasive, and that can be, that explains one's personality. Okay, one's behavior. Central traits are those traits which are, forms primary basis for individual personality. Okay. So the example of central trait will include one's honesty, shyness, anxiety, intelligence, and irritability. So these are less pervasive than the cardinal traits, but there are, they are general disposition about an individual. On the other hand, secondary traits are very, very intimate traits which cannot be known by, just in one meeting. These traits can only be understood when you are in very close with other person, or you are very, at an intimate level, you are very close to that person. Like one's interests, what are one's eating habits. These are the secondary traits. I hope you are clear about these three types of traits. Moving ahead was another trait theorist, Cattell's. For Cattell, Alport, along with Odbert, in 1936, prepared a list of around 18,000 words that explains one's personality. Okay. Later on, Cattell, in 1965, with the help of a statistical technique known as factor analysis, jot down 16 personality traits. These are warmth, reasoning, emotional stability, dominance, liveliness, rule, consciousness, social boldness, sensitivity, vigilance, abstractness, privateness, apprehension, openness to change, self-reliance, perfectionism, and tension. He also stated a formula of personality which refers to R equal to F function of S or S comma P. According to him, person's response is a function of stimulus situation and the personality structure of an individual. Okay. So Cattell has also included the, component of heredity and environment in the development of personality traits. According to him, there are two types of traits, which are source traits and surface traits. Surface traits are can be understood as behavioral characteristics that describes a particular trait, like extroversion. And source traits are, at a deeper level. Moving ahead with the five-factor theory, the Big Five. Okay, it was given by McRae and Costa in 1995, who focused on the 5 basic personality traits, which can be understood by, or which can be remembered by the acronym OCEAN. Okay, these traits are high-order traits, which tend to have several interrelated lower order traits. Okay, according to McRae and Costa, the interaction of the basic tendencies with the environmental factors forms one personality. Okay, these are openness, consciousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Openness are those traits which includes being intellect, imaginative, creative, and insightful. Consciousness is a trait which include being careful, organized, thoughtful, and planning ahead and paying attention to the details. And there, most of the like this trait is related when a person is a person with this trait display a very goal-directed behavior. Okay, and tend to have control over their impulses. Moving ahead with the extroversion, the person high on this trait tend to be sociable, energetic, excited, assertive, and gregarious. Okay. Next is agreeableness. It refers to the person's ability to being helpful, kind, affectionate, depict pro-social and altruistic behaviors. On the other hand, the last trait, neuroticism refers to the traits like being very moody, anxious, irritability, and they tend to lack emotional stability. Okay, moving ahead with the next theory is a biological trait theory, in which was proposed by Isaac in 1967. He places a great emphasis on biological basis in determining one's personality. According to him, an individual has two specific personality dimensions, which he named as extroversion versus introversion and neuroticism versus emotional stability. Later on, he added the third one, which is psychoticism. He also proposed that an individual personality consists of 3 dimensions, which are known as super traits or types. Okay. According to him, the 3 dimensions or these 3 traits ranges from one extreme to another extreme. Introversion refers to being shy, remain reserved, while on the other hand, extroversion is the outgoing nature of an individual. Okay, it is similar to the one of the trait of Big Five. Similarly, neuroticism is once being emotional, tense, anxious, and moody. So when Isaac said that these personality traits tend to get affected by the biological processes, what does it mean? We can understood this by taking an example like arousal. which is governed by reticular activating system and is said to create differences in extroversion and introversion trait. Okay, so when a person is introverted, or in the cases of introverted people, they tend to have a very high arousal levels. So their sensitivity to the stimulus tend to be very high because they are already operating on a very high arousal. Hence, they generally avoid the situations in which further arousal might occur to maintain a homeostasis. Okay, so on the other hand, extroverted people tend to have low arousals, so they need excitement and high arousal activities to maintain their homeostasis. In case of neuroticism, lower thresholds are needed for activation in visceral brain. Hence, individuals tend to get easily upset, irritable, moody, or anxious. Whereas high thresholds are necessary for activation that tend to create a more emotional stable personality. Eisen also take account into the role of environment in addition to the biological factors. In the diagram, one can see that there is two extremes for both the scales. Okay, so one who is emotionally stable and introvert and also introvert tend to be calm, even-tempered, reliable, peaceful, careful, passive. Whereas on the other hand, who is extroverted but tend to be emotionally stable, they are easygoing, carefree, they tend to be leader, they are outgoing, they're responsive, they are sociable. Okay, while on the unstable side, the extroverted people who are emotionally unstable tend to be aggressive, optimistic, excitable, changeable, impulsive, touchy, and restless. While on the other hand, people who are emotionally unstable but are introverted tend to be anxious, rigid, moody, pessimistic, reserved, unsociable, and tend to be quiet. I hope this is all clear. Let's move to the next slide, which is behavioral approach system and behavioral inhibition system. It was advocated by Jeffrey Gray in 1982. BAS or behavioral approach system is the GO system, which is characterized by stimulus seeking and reward orientation. On the other hand, BIS, yani behavioral inhibition system, is the stop system of the brain that inhibits one's behavior as it may lead to anxiety. Thus, BAS is related to extroversion, as we are mainly inclined to the Western notions of self and personality. But it looks from an individualistic orientation to the self and only throws light on independence and uniqueness of self. On the other hand, the Indian tradition is very different from the Western perspective. Okay, in Indian tradition, one tend to look at self as interrelational and contextual. So, according to Indian perspective, the interdependent self is divided into two types of self-constructual, named independent and interdependent self. Okay, so according as proposed by Marcus and Kitayama in 1991, it focuses on family and social context. It also focuses on the attributes of self and personality as more plural and fluid form. According to our Indian scripture, Bhagavad Gita, they mention that there are three types of personality named Sattvic, Rajas, and Tamas. In Hindu philosophy, these three, are known as gunas, which are also known as trigunas. Sattva refers to the spiritual aspects, which reflects one's good nature, peacefulness, and a balanced personality. Whereas Rajas refers to the energetic, active, ambitious, fiery type, and action-oriented personality. And the third gun, Tamas gun, refers to the negative aspects of the personality, which reflects negative emotions, anger, fear, and laziness of a person. All these three aspects tend to correlate or interact with each other that forms their personality. Okay, it is just one type of personality that is predominant than the other at a given point of time. Okay, as I told you, the interplay between these three guns determines an individual nature, characteristics, and types of personality they are going to have. Moving ahead with the next slide is doshas. Ayurveda talks about three doshas, and it also states that the combination of these doshas makes each individual unique in his or her nature and personality. Okay, these are Vat, Pitta, and Kapha. Vat relates to the space and air element. Pitta relates to the fire and water element, and Kapha relates to the water and the earth element. It is evident that an individual will have a predominant dosha which reflects the properties of those elements in one's personality. Okay, these three mind-body types reflects the qualities of elements they represent. For example, if an individual is Vat dominant, then he or she will be more active. On the other hand, Pitta dominated personality will have a fiery type of personality. Okay, it is also said that when these three doshas are in proper proportions, or are in proper coordination within the individual, the person is said to have a balanced personality. So for a person to have a balanced personality, it is necessary that these three doshas are in proper proportion, or are in correct proportions. Moving ahead, there are also 5 aspects of self according to Taittiriya Upanishad, which are Annamaya Kosh, Pranayam Kosh, Manomaya Kosh, Vinamaya Kosh, Anandamaya Kosh. So according to the Taittiriya Upanishad, there are 5 aspects of self, which is more or less similar to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which self is composed by these 5 kosh or aspects. Okay, Annamaya Kosh refers to one's physical body, which is fulfilled by the food. Next comes Pranayam Kosh, which is the life inside the body, which is the energy sheath. Manomaya Kosh is the mind and the processing of thoughts and emotions in the individual, which is the mind sheath. Moving ahead is Vinamaya Kosh, which is our intellect and cognition. Okay, which is the knowledge sheath. And Anandamaya Kosh is our innermost layer, which is our bliss sheath. Okay, moving ahead, I hope we are clear with these. Moving ahead is our Vedantic tradition of India. According to the Vedantic tradition of India, personality is described as individual's karma, or in English, or in layman term, what a person does determines its personality. Okay, one's actions, behaviors, responses will lead to karma phal, or the consequences of life. The ultimate goal in life, according to the Vedantic tradition of India, has to be the ultimate goal in life to have no more karma and attain a liberation from the cycle of the birth and death. That is the detachment practice. With this, we are going to end our unit. I hope you all understand this unit very clearly. If you have any doubt, you can share it in the comments below. Moving ahead with the discussion of the questions. The question first is, analyze the definition of personality given by Alport. As I've already told you that Alport gives the definition of personality, in which there were 4 components: dynamic organization, psychophysical units, and characteristics, behavior, and thoughts. Okay. Next question, what are 3 basic structures of personality according to Freud? I've also explained you the basic structure of personality, which includes id, ego, and superego. Okay, it is like a child which works on the pleasure principle, whereas superego is our moral conscience, which help us to identify the difference between right and wrong. And the ego creates a balance between the two and resolve the conflicts between the two. Compare Freud's analytic theory with the Maslow's approach to personality. Okay, so how does psychoanalytic theory is different from the Maslow's approach to the personality? Freud emphasizes on the unconscious mind and unconscious desires that play a role in determining one's personality. Whereas Maslow stated that a human personality or human behavior is driven and guided by a set of basic needs, which he stated in his hierarchy of needs. The first need being physiological needs, moving ahead with the safety needs, then belongingness and love needs, esteem needs, and the ultimate need for attaining one's potential, that is the need for self-actualization. Next is differentiate between state and trait. I've already explained you, and you can go back and learn it. You can go back and revise it. State is a temporary state of emotion or thought, whereas trait is a relatively stable or consistent over time. A state is when a person say I'm feeling anxious, whereas a trait is I'm a very anxious person. Okay, next is discuss the behavioral and cognitive theories of personality. In this, we will explain the social learning theories of Bandura, Skinner's operant conditioning theory, and in the cognitive theories, we will introduce with the Rotter's locus of control and cognitive affective personality system. Next question is describe humanistic theories of personality, which is a previous year question. Okay, in this, we will explain the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Carl Rogers' theory of personality, which includes the self, the notion of maintaining congruency between the real self and the ideal self. Moving ahead, differentiate between the real self and the ideal self. As I've already told you, real self is who you are and ideal self is who you want to be. Next is explain the BAS and BIS system. BAS, what is BAS? I've already told you. BAS is the GO system, that is behavioral approach system, which is characterized by stimulus seeking, in which a person seeks the stimulus, in which the person is reward oriented. While on the other hand, BIS, which is behavioral inhibition system, it is the stop system in which the brain inhibits or says that stop the behavior that might lead to anxiety. BAS is related to extroversion, while BIS related to the neuroticism. I hope you all understand this unit very clearly. You should also practice these questions in the written form once. Okay.